Hi everyone, welcome to the CSR's event, Mind the Fire and Security Gaps, how to bring the two generations together. I'm Maddie and I'm the Candidate Relationship Manager for CSR and I've been here for just under 5 years. Leigh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Leigh. I'm the Associate Director at CSR. I've been with the business for just over 7 years. And my role, I help business leaders and hiring managers build out high-performing teams by facilitating introductions to top talent that aren't easy to find. Something I thoroughly love and enjoy. Is a big passion for me, which I enjoy a lot. We'll be your host for today. For today's webinar, Complete Security Recruitment, known as CSR, is a recruitment agency that is passionate about the electronic fire and security industry. We've been operating since 2005 and we're looking to provide answers to the burning questions surrounding this sector. There is a big gap between the ages of engineers nowadays, and there's a big gap in the skills, knowledge and experience. So we've assembled a nice panel of specialists from the fire and security industry that we can tap into their knowledge and find out what the answers are, have a discussion and go from there. So over to you, Mads.
Curtis, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about yourself.
So Curtis Wright, been in the industry straight from school, so 18 years now, since 2003. I'm currently a head of electronic security and monitoring for ICTS, and I run an alarm receiving centre called ASM up in Manchester. Like I said, started on the tools, did an apprenticeship scheme with Chubb, worked there for 15 years, and then I was a service and commercial director for Orion, that are now part of the Scooton Group, before joining ICTS only in January this year.
Lovely, thank you. Keith?
Okay, where do I start? I joined the industry in 1987, so I'm the old person. Been mainly as an engineer, though I've done a few management roles over the years. But mainly the last 15 years have been senior engineer for various companies as on the service side of business. As I say, I've done a bit of service management and account management along the way, but quintessentially I'm an engineer. It's what I like, it's what I enjoy. And I've done most of the roles that are available in the fire and security business. Multi-role, you know, all the usual boxes ticked. Worked for big and little companies, so quite a varied career, I think we could call it.
Pierre?
Yeah, good evening. I'm Pierre. Currently, I'm a regional service manager for Reliance High Tech. Been in the managerial role, mainly in the service department for the last 7 years. Before that, project delivery, fire and security. And then in business development, the sales side of things prior to that.
No worries. Thanks for that, guys. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. Obviously, we're obviously going to be talking and asking questions. We do have a Q&A bar where we can ask questions. So me and Leigh at the end of it will be answering any questions. Feel free to put any opinions and questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. And then, yeah, we'll go from there. So I think we'll start off with the questions. So I'll start. So what initially, we'll go with everyone on this one. So Curtis, what initially attracted you to the fire and security industry?
For me personally, because I didn't know anything about it, I never heard of it. I just knew that I wanted to do an apprenticeship. I wanted to do something hands-on. I didn't want to do the normal plumbing, chippy and electrician route, and saw it just come up as an opportunity. So yeah, nothing, no big long history of family in the industry or anything like that. It was just something that caught my eye, and I thought, yeah, I don't know anyone that does that, so I'm going to go and have a look at that. And here we are, 20 years on.
Keith, what about you? The same or different?
No, I actually started out as a British Telecom engineer.
Okay.
Apprentice and then engineer, and was approached by a fairly well-known fire and security company who were looking for a communications engineer to work on a project that they had for NatWest. That was a long time ago. And then, yeah, started off, working in the install side of that company, and then swapped to service. And the rest is history, basically.
Nice. Okay. And Pierre, what about you?
I got into the industry quite a number of years ago. One of my close friends had a fire and security company, and I used to help out on the weekends and evenings just to top up my finances. And it just grew from there, really. Just got more involved, learned more, enjoyed it more passion, and then, yeah, just grew from there and progressed.
Nice. Okay. Lee, take it away.
Good stuff. And this will cross over a little bit. How did you learn about the fire and security industry, and how did you get involved in it, and how has it shaped you in particular ways? Because it has that habit of taking over people's lives, and most of us spend a lot of time in and around the industry in a big way, even us guys. So obviously two parts to that question, so take it away, Curtis.
Yeah, so like I said, I joined from an apprenticeship, and it was quite interesting because it's such a small community, this industry, as much as it's a big industry, everyone seems to know each other, and it's surprising how small it is when you actually get into the industry. But no, I've always really enjoyed it. I think I can think of a couple of examples, but I remember as an apprentice, and one of my first jobs I did an installation project for, and it was a little old lady that had a break-in while she was actually in the bath, and had intruders in the house, and we were there to put an intruder alarm in for her. And just that sort of sense of reward, after finishing that job, leaving her, knowing how safe she felt, how secure, the difference of even her demeanour from entering in the morning and leaving in the evening. I think I like to think that's what every engineer and everybody in the industry is in it for, for the reason that we do it, for security, for safety, and for safety of life, more so in the fire business. But yeah, that's something I'm quite passionate about, and I still am today. And I always try and kind of remember almost like why you're in it, because there are days when it can be a slog. We've all been in this game long enough to know it's a 24/7, 365 business. So you have to have you have to have something that keeps you driven. And for me, that's definitely it.
And Keith?
Well, as I've already said, I was headhunted, strangely, approached by a company that those of you who have been around for a few years would recognise, a company called, they were FELTHAM Security, or FELTHAM EMI, later to become part of ADT. But yeah, they approached me after I'd been, I worked for BT for 7 years, started off at 16, worked from apprenticeship and became a senior engineer for them. They approached me with an offer. I'll be honest, I was a little bored where I was at BT. It was back in the day, well, before some of you were born, where it was just after the old post office days, and it was part of the government, and I never did any work, so it was quite a boring place to work. I got approached, joined Thorn, and loved it, just purely, I think, for the variety. Never every day's different, particularly on service, but even on install. But every day's different. I was lucky enough to work with some really, really good guys, people that have been in the industry at that stage a long time, and were really, really good engineers. And I learned a really good grounding to my engineering knowledge. I just had a great time, and I've just continued to have a great time and continue to enjoy being an engineer and getting my fingers dirty. I managed to have 10 years out of the industry at one stage, and then came back in. And even my little flirts with management, I always end up going back to the same thing, which is I love to get my fingers dirty. I love to, I like to be out on site. I like to be talking to customers. I like to build up relationships. I'm a I think I'm a people person. I think Lee will confirm. I'm a people person.
Definitely, okay, definitely.
And I enjoy going to site and talking to customers and being a part of their part of their week or day or whatever, and getting them out of trouble and just generally the great things about being an engineer.
Keith, do you think that's part of the problem now, though? Just kind of getting to the point of the mind the gap, I guess. I'd ask you a question, but I felt like I was a bit like yourself, Keith. I love being an engineer. I still love being involved, and even at the level I'm at now, I still enjoy going to site and supporting. But in the last sort of 4 years, obviously recruitment around engineering has been really challenging. Wherever I've been in 3 different companies, it's always been the same. Everyone you speak to says the same. I really struggle to find the candidates now, the engineers that just want to be engineers. Where do you think, maybe in your years of experience, where do you think maybe that's come from? What stopped people just enjoying the job they're in and developing in that career, if that makes sense?
I think it's almost a millennial attitude. It's the fact that the youngsters are in this bubble of Instagram and Facebook and all that sort of stuff, where everyone strives to be famous and have everything and be rich but do that in 15 minutes and not actually work for it. And I think that's the problem, is that's a general attitude. Whereas go back a generation, I always strive, because my father strived to work for a living, to earn everything I got. And I think that's where it's changed. I think it's more of an attitude generally, not just to engineering, but I don't think we, as an industry, we don't make it appealing. We don't promote ourselves. Now we'll go further into this, and I'll go on for this for hours, because this is I think one of the reasons Lee asked me to join is because I've got an opinion on this, and I've had an opinion on this for 15 years about lack of people coming into the industry. And it's just, we don't make it appealing for people. We don't set people goals. We bring engineers in, particularly young engineers, and we expect them to sit in a van with another engineer for 3 years and carry the tools and whatever. We don't set them goals, and we don't give them something to aim for. There's no obvious qualifications in our industry that we can aim them at. So there's lots of things that we don't do as an industry, and I think that's why I think people are not finding it not find being an engineer fulfilling. Yeah.
I think that was, again, when going back to the first question about what attracts you and what keeps you in it and interested. For me, it was the joys of being an engineer was the sites you got to see, the types of properties that you're working on, the variation of your day to day. If you go and do an apprenticeship in plumbing, you're going to be looking at toilets for a long time, and they don't look that much better wherever you go. The electricians, you're on build. If you want to be commercial, you're on building sites for your whole career. In our industry, you've got the opportunity to see everything, every layer of work, from a building site to a really refined finished property or a museum, or it is so vast, isn't it? And I think you're right. I think to a point, everyone, for me, in the last few years, everyone that I've sort of worked with, tried to grow their own careers, if you like, are kind of looking for those next steps to management, but it always seems to be driven by money. It doesn't seem to be driven by the passion for the industry. It's because they think that the manager's salary is going to be more. And maybe that comes back to what you said, the 15-minute of fame thing. Maybe that's a good way of looking at it. But it's an interesting point.
I think we historically, engineers have not been that well paid compared to other sectors certainly in the building industry. Compare a junior engineer to a Sparky working on site. They're commanding, I don't know what it is, 180 quid a day or whatever it is nowadays for a relatively junior Sparks. That's quite a gap. So I think, I'm always been caught between a rock and a hard place. I like being an engineer, but I like the idea of being a manager because it gives me the facility to bring on other people and to pass on my knowledge. And you know, I've done a fair bit of mentoring and stuff over the years, and I always flip between the two. But you know, if anyone says, "Have you got a preference?" It's yeah. Or if anyone asks me what I am, I'm an engineer. Never say I'm a manager. I've never, even when I was a manager, I was an engineer. I always had a screwdriver somewhere near me. So, but that's because I've got a passion for engineering. You know, and if I could earn as much money as I could as an engineer. Sorry, buddy.
That's right. I think the money side is definitely the case. When you speak to engineers and you speak to them about management roles, they go, well, I could just do an engineering role and do overtime and get the same money and not have the same responsibility. The salaries are just ridiculous at the moment, aren't they, Lee? They're just, honestly, some of it, it's just like the industry salary-wise has just gone up, like, but in the way that people don't want to go into management and have like a salaried salary where they cannot have like any overtime and they're just on like a basic and then they're expected to have a more responsibility. It's just
and I think that comes from, you know, when you're an engineer, you've got that incentive and you've got that constant opportunity to earn more. It's perfectly within your hands to, you know, work as that. And I've said this for, you know, I've seen it for years. I was an install engineer originally. Saturday was part of your working week. You know, that was your bunts money. You worked a Saturday morning and you got double time, and that was your beer money. You know, the problem is now no one wants to do overtime because we're paying such high basics. No one needs the money anymore. So we kind of create our own problem in this industry, and that's something that I think, you know, I've talked to lots and lots of leaders of varying companies over the years, and I think we don't help ourselves, you know, as an industry and as each other. You know, we're, like you say, we talk about how expensive the salaries are, but we're the ones that keep willing to pay them and keep upping it and upping it and upping it, and we've just ended up competing against each other and blowing each other out of the water, and it's made it too easy, hasn't it?
Isn't the reason we've had to do that as an industry, because we've got so few people moving from that, you know, the only way for companies to encourage people into their business is to throw them a fish, you know, and that's what they're doing. And unfortunately, they're throwing them a fish without any all they're doing is the easy route, which is let's give them loads of money. Whereas there are other ways of doing it, and you know, but that's just the way the industry's gone. And now as an industry, we're stuck.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to be talking about. Is why are we not why are businesses, big businesses in it, and there are some big businesses in our industry, why are they not encouraging youngsters? Why are they not, you know, doing the apprenticeship schemes? Why are they not trying to? Because that's what it's about. It's at the end of the day, businesses have got to give back to try and encourage people in. More people we get in, there's no need to throw loads of high salaries at people.
But also, Keith, and going back to your earlier point, you know, there's something to be really proud of in being an engineer in the industry. You know, I don't know necessarily that, like to your earlier point, that we are rewarding enough of that in itself. Do you know what I mean? You know, yes, we can talk money and salaries and all the rest of it, but you don't always see in other industries people always looking for the projection, you know, for going up into the ranks. You know, sometimes people are just content in the job they do because it's what they enjoy. But our industry seems very driven towards trying to train an engineer to be something else, a sales guy, a BDM, an account manager, an ops manager, whatever it may be. We seem to always want to be pushing that. And actually, what's wrong with having a really good engineer and training other engineers to be really good engineers? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the other thing we don't do is we don't reward engineers in the correct way. We don't encourage them. I don't think they get sometimes I don't think they get the recognition that they really deserve. And that's something that I've had that conversation with managers, you know, throughout parts of my career, because, you know, a company relies on its engineers to get its money. That's how it gets its money. You know, regardless of anything else, you have to have an engineer on site to make its dosh. You've got to be looking after those guys. You know, you can't, and how many times as a service engineer, I probably hear this more, but how many times do you hear about a guy who's been on call and done 24 hours straight or 20 hours straight, been, you know, forced to go out and call out, and then the company expects them to go back to work the next day without any consideration of how they are and what they do. And, you know, it's things like that. It's just that, you know, it's not all about money. It's about the way that engineers are treated, and about the way how they feel in the hierarchy of the business.
How they're valued.
And what about you, Pierre? What's your opinion on this one? You've been sitting there listening and taking on board the comments.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I get Curtis' point and Keith's. You know, I see both sides, and it's trying to get that balance, isn't it? It has become a bidding war, I think, due to lack of experience and engineers. And that's a shame, because then the focus is money. Rather than Curtis saying is, you know, these quality of engineers and being satisfied with being a top quality engineer rather than leading or wanting to progress. And with Keith, I totally get it, because I try and always do it. I try and make a point of doing it, showing the engineers value. And that might be just saying, thank you, well done for that job, and giving them some feedback. You know, but always trying to deliver that praise and value that engineer. So whether it is monetary reward, an incentive, or just a pat on the back, well done, cheers Keith, done a brilliant job today, client rung up, happy, you know, and maybe that's a little bit lost, you know. It is tough, isn't it? You know, the lack of engineers, the bidding war, and probably the undervaluedness of the engineer, like Keith saying, that, you know, we need to address that, I think.
And something that we come across quite a bit, and because we obviously speak to guys on a daily basis, and I think Maj will agree with this. I think a lot of guys in the industry, especially the engineers, do feel that the recognition isn't given to them for what they do all the time, and sometimes it isn't financial rewards that they're looking for. Sometimes it's like, right, you've been with us, you've been loyal to us, we can give you some training. And I know it's been difficult over COVID, getting people on training courses, but within a lot of companies, a lot of the senior engineers have got the knowledge to be able to train the younger engineers, and some of the slightly more mature ones as well that need it. You know, there's a lot of guys that just are hungry for training and to be able to improve their skills. And it's very much about bringing the skills, the money, and everything into consideration, and it's a juggling act.
No, and I agree. And I think what's really interesting for me is because I feel exactly like Keith. You know, I feel that and I've said this for many years. I've had lots of arguments with CEOs of companies in the past over the fact that they believe engineers are only interested in money. Now, being an engineer at heart still, like Keith and probably like Pierre and others, I don't believe that. I genuinely, personally, I don't believe that. I think people do it because they enjoy the job. And I think the reward, the satisfaction, and to Keith's point, the praise and the understanding from management. But I don't know whether that's true anymore, Lee. You know, it's really interesting to get, you know, Keith is an engineer, he's still an active service engineer. And to hear him say the same things as what I believe is you know, it's really encouraging that, you know, hopefully there is some more of that out there, because if it is just about the money, then I think there's something deeper wrong with the industry. We're in a quite a specialist market of looking after, you know, life safety, fire alarms, and protecting people in their assets. It's quite an important industry. If it's just solely money, then we're doing something wrong anyway.
Yeah,
in my
100%.
opinion.
I think going back to Keith's point as well about the world changing and everyone changing and social media and everything, I think a lot of people at the moment, they just want a quick fix. So they just go for like the quickest thing, money. They don't want to delve into it. They don't want to, and everyone's under pressure. They've got SLAs, they've got everything. Like half the time people don't even think. They're not even thinking about doing it. And that's why managers are under pressure. That's why managers don't say thanks or whatever, because they're over pressured by other people that are higher. So I do think it is a change in the world and how people are. They just want a quick, they want it fixed quick. They don't want to just bear with, you know.
I think you're right. I think I think the world is almost like everyone's waiting, looking at the carrot that's being dangled in front of them. And I take Curtis's point of view. For me, the reward was never really money. Nice, say I'd do it for nothing, but I really have. I get a real buzz about going to a site, fixing a bit of kit, getting the customer home. I've real buzz from it, and that's for me. You know, and I don't necessarily want, you know, my boss to say, "Oh, you've done a really wonderful job," because I know how good an engineer I am. I don't need anyone to tell me. But but for me, it's about I build myself up. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy going to site when it don't work, walking out there knowing I fixed it. You know,
self-satisfaction of fixing the problem.
Absolutely, that's exactly. You know, and being encouraged to do that is something I don't think we're doing. We're not encouraging people to be proud of what they do.
I think that's down to time constraints. Okay, do you think there are companies that give their engineers 6, 8, 9, 10 jobs a day, and it's get in, get out as quick as you can?
It is, but that's self-perpetuating. We haven't got enough engineers, so we're putting time constraints. So we're not doing our jobs properly and promoting engineers. So we've not got enough engineers. It's just a vicious circle. But what it is someone has got to break that circle. And someone's got to take the initiative.
I mean, there are companies out there that are doing everything that they can and taking on apprentices and trainees, but there's not enough people doing that. There's not enough companies doing that, sorry, to bring a big influence into the numbers of the volume of people in the industry. Maddie and me hear it time and time again. I need an engineer to hit the ground running. What's your requirement? I need X, Y, Z, but they've got to be able to hit the ground running. And that shuts the door on so many of the younger engineers that still need further training, that are stuck in PPM roles, stuck in apprentice roles, and desperately want to move forward, but they're not given the opportunity because everybody wants someone to hit the ground running. No, I haven't got time to train them. I haven't got time to send them on training courses. I haven't got time to pair them up with a senior engineer. I just need someone to start Monday, give them their T-shirt, give them the keys to their car, and off they go. And that's where we are at the moment, and that's what we hear time and time again. And it's not going to change until people start realising that the ageing workforce that we've got is not an infinite supply, and there's not enough younger engineers.
On that, Leigh, and what I would say on that, Leigh, and I think Keith touched on it earlier, I think one thing I'd say is there has to be an element of honesty. It's got to be two-way, because from a hiring manager's perspective, and I've seen this time and time again, you know, you sit in front of a young lad who tells you how much he wants to do training and learn how to be a Gallagher, CQ, Linnell, whatever the hell he wants to be, you know, but they don't really want that. They just want the money. You know, it needs to be a two-way. It needs to be honest. So I've done it. I've, you know, given lads opportunities to go on really expensive, high-end kit. You know, oh, I don't want to do that course actually. You know, I haven't really got time at the moment. Or, you know, so it's. I guess what I'm trying to say is it has to be honest two-way. You know, it has to be honest from the candidate and the engineer side as well as from the hiring company. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to provide you all this training and then not. If I do that, then I'm not being honest. But likewise, if that engineer just wants to come in because I'm paying £5,000 more than anybody else, then be honest about that. You know, and if that's, do you see what I mean? It's too much.
Yeah.
I think
that goes on to our next question, because we was going to ask, how do you get the ball rolling with, and do you take initiative by asking your employees what they want to learn or be trained on, or do they come to you?
I mean, in all companies, I think now, you know, a training matrix is a pretty standard thing. But let's be honest, it doesn't mean anything unless it's actually done properly.
Yeah.
You know, you need to engage. It's a two-way conversation. There's no good me trying to create something that I need to meet my specific business needs if that doesn't meet the individual's needs. It's never going to work. And it's not going to work for me, and it's not going to work for them. So, 100%, Maddie, it's really important that it's continual open dialogue. You know, continual communication. You know, how many companies have 3, 6, 9, 12-month appraisals and they never get done?
No.
You know, I've only been talking to my team about this week internally. You know, we don't just have to do it because they are on maternity leave, they've just returned, or because they're on a 6-month probation, so we have to do it. We should be doing it all the time. There's no wrong time to sit down with an employee and have a conversation. You know, and say, where do you want to be? What does your future look like?
I think a lot of the HR side of fire and security businesses gets pushed aside because it's like, oh, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. Like, don't worry about people's feelings, it's fine. We've got this, it's fine. Like, and they don't need an appraisal. What do they need an appraisal for? Because it's still that kind of business where it's like on the road, all that stuff in the office and that can be left. You know, that's that sort of attitude. I do think it needs to be.
I think you touched on something quite serious there, Maddie.
That
I think lots of companies, and I think more smaller companies than the big boys, and there's lots and lots of small companies out there that have got no concept of HR, let alone actually doing it. You know, I've worked for companies that have got no HR department. It's just down to one of the owners to, maybe sign a bit of paper every now and then. But they don't go through the formality, as Curtis has just said about the thing about doing appraisals. You know, there's something very positive about sitting down with an engineer and going, "How you doing? How do you feel you're doing? What can we do? Where would you like to go?" All these questions, you're engaging the engineer instead of that engineer feeling like he's at the end of the phone and all he's doing is taking all the grief or running around like a blue-ass fire because you're busy. It's managers have got to do that, but companies have got to allow their managers to do it. It's not a manager's fault because, I mean, most service managers, in my experience, are piggies in the middle, and are being poked from both ends. Got, directors above them giving them grief, engineers below them giving them grief. I think this is harsh. Who want to be a service manager? I'm sure.
Pierre, what can you say about this? What can you tell us about this?
But the piggy in the middle. What can Pierre the piggy in the middle say?
Yeah. How do you deal with that side of it? Are you involved in the appraisals, or is it HR side and that?
I am, and I have in many companies, and Keith's valid point, and I think when they get forgotten, I'm quite into them, and I like meeting the guys monthly anyway. Out on the road, we go out for breakfast, and we meet somewhere local where they can shoot off to their jobs after, so least impact on the business. But I always try and do that, and I try and make it informal but open, so they can open up to me in an informal way, but get anything off their chest. Because what will happen is, engineer will leave. You haven't had these conversations. You don't know why they've left, and it happens again and again and again, and you don't address the issue. But if you have this, they can moan about it. You can take it back and perhaps change it. Not everything can change. However, by having them regular contact meetings, chats, you find out the good, the bad, and try and make a difference. Especially now where engineers are so in demand, so rare to find a good one. You don't want to be losing talent. So how can you keep them? And I think communication is key, and keeping in contact with them, asking them how they're doing, regardless of the pressures above. We do. Keith's right. You get all sorts. Not only the engineers, not the directors, you get it from the customer as well. So there is a lot of pressure, but it's short-sighted not to have that engagement with your engineers, because they're the workforce. So they're what going to keep your customer happy. Your customer's happy, they don't get complaints. Your director's not giving you grief. So ultimately, you have got all the pressures, but let's break it down and look at the importance and prioritise it. And if a happy engineer is going to make it work, happy customer, happy service manager, ecstatic director.
You've touched on a good point there. It's sorry, Keith, you're right.
That's all right. No, I'm just going to say it's easier said than done. But I think in a nutshell, that is right. Particularly as your engineers, your customer face. Regardless of where they ring up to report their problems, your engineer's your customer face. If your customer face is in a good place, goes into his job, engages with his customer, does all the things he's supposed to do, not necessarily just with his screwdriver, but with his brain as well, it all helps. And we don't promote that. One of the things I'm touching on another subject, but it's like we don't teach customer service to our engineers. Atrocious thing. I mean, I've worked with some engineers that want shooting the way they talk to people and you know, their surly attitude and stuff. And you know, I like to think that the reason why I got on reasonably well as an engineer is because I can engage with the customer. You know, but I learned how to do that. I stood on nightclub doors when I was 21 years of age. That's me. I can do customer service, but we don't teach people how to do that. It's not part of it. We teach them how to hold the screwdriver, and we teach them how to read the color codes on a resistor, but we don't teach them how to engage with a customer.
I think the other thing is, Keith, for me, and I think this is a really important point, and it's something where in my current position, where I'm a smaller business, it's even more important to have that conversation. But this industry isn't the same everywhere you go. You know, one company to the next are very different. Your clientele, your day-to-day work life. You know, as an engineer, one thing I'd say to anybody that whether people are listening to this, as an engineer thinking about going to another company to find another job, make sure you do your research. Make sure you do a bit of due diligence yourself. You know, because one fire and security company to the next is very, very different. You know, if you like working in data center environments and you like working on high-end blue chip flagship stores and, you know, and enterprise level equipment, then choose the right company. There's no point going to a local family firm in the outbacks of North Wales and expecting to be working data centers and secure panels every day. You know, and I think it's something that I'm trying really hard at the moment to gauge and understand the market a little bit more, because we've had churn. You know, I've had engineers come, I've had them leave. You know, we're using subcontractors a lot for servicing, which for me is never something I really like to do, you know, because as you say, Keith, that's your customer face, is that engineer. You know, so you really want that person to be part of your business. For installation, it's not so bad, as we all know. You know, you're building sites, you're not necessarily working with an end user. But like I said, I think one bit of advice I'd give to any young engineer looking to move on or find, think about what you enjoy. Think about what part of the job you like, you know, if it's the customer facing or not. Because again, like Keith, for you, you know, from my Chubb history, you dealt with a lot of residential. You know, you need an engineer that's happy doing that and is willing to sit down with an old lady and have a cup of tea and a biscuit and delay and take 2 hours to do a job that should probably take 20 minutes. But you know, where I'm at today, I don't have any residentials. I don't do residentials. So if an engineer comes to me and expects the job to be the same as what they've got from a Chubb or a Secom or an ADT or whoever it might be, they're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to be the type of work they want to be doing. And to your point, Keith, we're all the same. If we're not happy in ourselves, then your productivity goes down and your enjoyment goes down with it. Yeah. So I think I don't know what there is now, something in the region of about 500 different fire and security companies in the UK, or might be even more than that. But they're all very different. They're all very unique, and they've all got their own quirks. And you know what PIERRE will offer you at a Reliance, or what wherever you work, Keith, or for me at ICTS, or for people I speak to in Chubb still, they're very different companies to work at. And I think it's really important that engineers understand that, because I've seen excellent engineers leave and jump from job to job to job for 4 years, really miserable, because they're looking at it all wrong. They're looking at the salary, they're looking at the package, they're not looking at what the job is. Absolutely. You know, oh, I'm miserable. I'm not, I thought I was going to be doing install and I'm not, I'm doing service. Well, you know, do your due diligence yourself. Do you know what I mean? You know, ask the right questions. It's important. It's as important for you as a candidate as it is for me as an employer. Yeah. You know, and like you said, you want happy staff, don't you? You want people to be productive. You want them to be happy. You want them to come in happy and go home happy.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's something that influences your home life as well. If you're not happy at work, you end up taking it home, and it can affect everything that goes on in your life with your husband, your wife, your partner, whoever, and the time that you spend with your kids. So it's important to have that happiness at work and enjoy what you do, because it will affect you ultimately right away across the board otherwise. Mm-hmm. I think we've all been there.
And like Pierre touched on, you know, we all understand how important communication is, but there's an ability for the engineers to feed back as well. You know, they should have the trust and the ability to reach out to the manager. And like Pierre said, the last thing you want is to lose an engineer, not understand why, because that way you can't fix that problem. You know, if you can engage in a conversation about something, you can change things. You know, there might be a better way of doing it that benefits everybody. you know, it might be more profitable for Pierre and his P&L, and it might be better for the engineer, you know. So it's important that that communication is always there.
Unfortunately, though, it's not always there, is it? I mean, I've personally been in a situation where I've left jobs for whatever reason, and nobody in the business has asked me why.
Yeah, and that's
But
crazy.
you hand your notice in, and then you're a pariah for a month. No one talks to you, and then they're desperate to get you out the door, and not ask the question, why are you moving on? And that's happened to me on more than one occasion.
It's just bitter though, isn't it? I don't understand why people do that. The more they're doing it, the more they're pushing people away, and the more you're not going to want to go ever. If you did want to go back there at one point in your life, you'd never go back there if they treated you like that.
But also, there are times, and I've seen engineers do this, where they hand their notice in because they're not happy. They don't really want to leave. What they want to do is they want someone to take notice.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Me and Leah saying this all the time at the moment.
And that happens a hell of a lot. I've seen it. It's happened to me. It's happened to engineers that I've had work under me, where, you know, you don't give them the time. They don't have the opportunity to say, you know, we don't like this because, and they think, well, the only answer is I've got to hand my notice in. And then if you don't ask them the question at that time, it never changes. You know, and I think that's unfortunately human nature. I mean, most humans don't like conflict, so they don't like to go storming into a manager's office and say, "This is wrong, that's wrong," blah blah blah. But they need to be encouraged in. You know, they need. You know, you need to bring your guys in. You need to sit them down, give them a cup of coffee, and say, "Right, okay, you're not happy. What can we do? What's the situation?"
Yeah,
and be adult about it, just for a change.
Definitely. Just
there's a fine line.
Oh, go on. No, go on. No, go on, Pierre. You go.
There's a fine line, Keith, you know, because I always try and be open like that and be as approachable as I can. But that person's got to engage as well. So, you know, it's got to be a two-way street. But the manager's got to be approachable, and you've got to have that opportunity to give your bit. And a prime example, I've inherited an engineer that's put his notice in, and I'm meeting him tomorrow because no one knows why he's leaving. So, you know, it could be like you said, Keith, it could be something, you know, they don't want to leave, but there's something niggling them, or they want to change in role, or whatever it might be. But no one knows his driver for leaving. So I phoned him up today and said, look, let's have a chat. It might not go anywhere, but at least I'll find out why he's leaving. And is there anything we can do as a business to help him stay? And, you know, from the feedback I've had from the team, he's going to be a real loss to the company. So why no one has grabbed hold of it, you know, and it's important. And while we're on this call and this webinar, you know, it's a prime, isn't it? He's going to go, and that's why we're getting gaps, because no one's actually engaging and finding out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you, mate, completely.
So the question I was going to ask was, what do yourselves do to keep up to date with like the new technologies, anything that's new out? Is there anything you particularly do to try and bridge that gap? Okay.
I was waiting for that.
Sorry, it's because you're next to me. Sorry. I always go for you first.
I think that for me, Maddie, it's to be honest, it's exactly the same, very basic concept. It's being honest, it's building relationships, and it's talking to people. You know, so it's partnering. I try to have really strong partner relationships as opposed to just business to business. You know, if I'm going to use an ADI, or I'm going to use a Prima or Norbane, whoever it might be, you know, I will use where I get that relationship. So how do I look at new technology? Through the partners, through the suppliers, through the manufacturers, through regular meetings, through, you know, a coffee, a quick catch up, popping over to a demo room. Nothing too complicated, Maddie. You know, as I said, for me, business doesn't need to be complicated. You know, it's very simple. You know, communication can fix most problems in the world, can't it? So yeah, for me, that's how I do it. You know, regular discussions with key suppliers, you know, whoever your main route is, whether that be technology partners or, and again, even down to things like your accreditations, your NSIs. You know, you can find a lot out through people like the NSI, through picking up the email circulars with updates and technology changes. Obviously, the big one at the moment is the PSTN, you know, being turned off in London, and the impacts that's going to have on the industry for both for myself from an alarm receiving centre point of view, and the changes that we have to adapt to be able to suit there, but obviously from an installation and maintenance point of view as well. So yeah, nothing too laborious or heavy, Maddie. No kind of spending hours and hours and hours on Google or anything like that. You know,
researching, studying at night.
Exactly.
Studying at night.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what we do have a lot of as well is some really good shows. You know, everyone knows the security event on, you know, the IFSEX, the variant. There's a lot we seem to have within the industry. There's quite a lot going on at all times. It's always bubbling. And, you know, listen, our industry, technology changes on a daily basis, doesn't it? You know, I mean, cameras at the moment, you know, as soon as you order one, it's gone obsolete because there's a super duper better model out the next day. You know, it's so yeah, it is quite challenging sometimes to keep up with the amount of change.
No worries. What about you, Keith? How do you keep up to date?
Well, I guess because I'm at the sharp end, I'm forced to keep up to date because as the install guys are putting it in, I'm going to fix it. So so I don't really have a lot of choice.
Spoken like a true service engineer.
Well, you know, if the cap fits. But that's, you know, I have no. I guess I'm a little bit lucky in the fact that I'm a bit of a geek, and I enjoy learning new stuff and putting new strings on my bow. So for me, it's never been an issue. I've always wanted to get involved with wherever I can and learn wherever I can. And I guess it's the reason why I've sort of my head's full of crap. It's because I've got loads of, you know, I've got everything from, you know, intruder alarms that no one's ever seen before because I'm too old, up to Secure and Gallagher and all sorts of stuff all floating around in my brain because I've constantly tried to keep up with it. Not necessarily always successfully, but I've tried my best. But I think generally it tends to be company driven. As a service engineer, you don't tend to learn stuff outside the company that you're working for. So if you're working for an enterprise company, then that's where all your learning is. If you're working for a domestic company, then you know you'll spend your time figuring out our Texicoms work. And I think, you know, most service engineers are driven more by the company they're with than themselves, because there is just such a big scope of stuff to learn. No one can know it all, so you have to sort of specialise. But as I say, it's generally driven by the kit that you're going to see on a day-to-day basis.
What about you, Pierre? Because obviously you've come from like a management background, haven't you? So do you try and get involved in like maybe knowing the basics of the technical side, or is it?
Yeah, so I have an overview of how things work. I don't go too deep in it because it's not my bag. You know, I have my go-to engineer, so I'll be like, Keith, go and sort this camera out. Just told me this camera's down, you go fix it. But when we look at technology, you know, it's the same as the case, really. You know, the industry's quite small, so everyone talks. There's a lot of networking. You know, there's a lot of magazines out. The manufacturers update you on your kit. A lot comes specified from the client. So, you know, it's almost pushed on you. You don't really have to look very far. You get handed it because everyone wants you to use their stuff. So you keep up with the technology because it's pushed out, I think. You know, like, you know, Curtis says, your manufacturers, your go-to suppliers, you know, you've got that good relationship. They'll be pushing you out all the new stuff because they want you to stay ahead of the game, so you keep buying and be market leaders. So, you know, that's where we go.
No worries. So yeah, the main the question I'm going to leave off with is, I know we've been talking about it for an hour, but short snippet, Curtis, why do you think there's such a gap in the two generations at the moment?
To be honest, I think Keith summed it up brilliantly earlier. I do think there is an issue with the younger generation wanting everything too quickly, you know, not being prepared to work for it. You know, when I first came off the tools and went into a management role some 10 years ago now, you know, I took a pay cut that took me 3 years in management before I started to earn more than what I did as an engineer.
Yeah.
You know, that was a sacrifice that I wanted to make because I wanted to look at a different career route. You know, I wanted to come off the tools at that time. So, yeah, I think I think there is a gap. I think there's an issue with. I don't believe that some of the younger generation are as committed to the industry, perhaps as much as just it being another job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I see a lot of that. You know, I worked with several apprenticeship schemes, and I must admit, you know, in the latter years, it didn't really feel like they were really in it for the industry. It was just another job. You know, it just become kind of fallen into, like, as I describe it, another one of those typical trades: a joiner, a chippy, a plumber. You know, and I think maybe that the passion that Keith still talks so freely and openly about, and you can really tell from him how much he enjoys it still, even after 30 years. I don't know if we have that at the moment in the youth, you know, in the younger generation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, I think that's big. I think that's a bigger problem than salaries and money and earnings and what car you're driving, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to get other people's opinions.
What about you, Keith?
Well, Curtis has just summed up my intellectual. But no, I think there is a generational thing. I think the millennial generation are a strange beast. I don't understand them, but that's because I'm an old boy. But you know, I find it quite difficult to understand their lack of motivation and whatever. But we've created this generation, and so it's down to us to fix it. And I think the only way that our industry is going to do it is not by throwing loads of money at it. I think it's got to make it attractive. It's got to promote it as being a blue chip industry. You know, it's not like being a plumber and unblocking toilets. You know, we're working a lot of the time. We work for big blue chip, you know, companies and retailers and stuff, and we should be promoting that, making youngsters be proud of the fact that they can go and do a job for I don't know off the top of my head, just typically say Marks and Spencer's is a good example. Go and be an engineer and working for Marks and Spencer's, a premium retailer, you know, and encourage them that's a really good thing, instead of it being, you know, oh, let's go and give an engineer a smoke pole and give him 2 years walking around smoking heads, because that's what they do. You know, we've got to make it enticing for them. You know, we've got to zhuzh it up a little bit, and that's not just something that management have got to do. Engineers, other fellow engineers have got to do. You know, we've got to make it appealing for them. You know, because they won't change. The millennial generation is not going to change on its own. So we've got to adapt to them, not the other way around.
Pierre, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a little bit in between both Curtis and Keith, I think. I think personally, the gap maybe because the apprenticeship never really kicked off. It's starting to happen now. So the gap there where the backfill in between. So I've got some really good apprentices and we use an apprenticeship scheme. And I think homegrown engineers are brilliant because you can mould them to how you want them. And I've brought this up with Lee before. And I think if you've got someone with the right attitude, you can train them. You can't train attitude, but you can train skill. And to bridge the gap, in my opinion, I think it is, you know, the company's got to be invested in it and committed. But, you know, we need to go out because apprenticeships for someone more mature is not enough money. You know, I know we've been hitting on money and saying it's not the driver. However, you get someone in their 30s, got a couple of kids, a mortgage, starting them on 19 grand or whatever, it's just not viable for them. And it's not because they're money driven, it's just they couldn't afford to live. So I think to bridge the gap, targeting transferable skilled people, so telecom engineers, like you say, Keith, you know, Sparkies, people that have got some kind of knowledge in cabling, a bit of engineering background, have got the right attitude, we can then develop them, nurture them, train them. They've got the right attitude, transferable skills, and put them on a development program with an incentivized pay scale scheme. So yeah, they need the training, but they can be brought in on a sensible salary with a targeted development plan to bring them up to a sensible mid to end engineer range. You know, I think that's sensible, you know. So you've got the goal there, the driver, and it's the two-way thing. So you can see some commitment from the company, say, yeah, if you get to this level, we'll pay X. But then from the candidate to have that driver to incentive to learn and get to that level. It is where I see it.
No worries. Oh, Lee, you're on mute.
So effectively a skills matrix with a sensible pay increase at various levels once achievements have been reached, with training and ability shown that they've absorbed the training. Is that what you're saying, Pierre?
Yeah, but a two-way, and it's got to be achievable, right? So the goals have got to be achievable.
100%.
And it's got to work for both parties. But I think, you know, that way, I think that's sensible, achievable, and then that bridge the gap. And not necessarily have to have transferable skills, but someone that's willing to learn and has that development plan in progress, and that support to nurture them and get them to that point.
Cool.
You know.
Thank you. This session will be on. This session has been recorded, so we will send it out to everyone. But yeah, thank you, and I hope everyone has a good night. See you later.
Excellent.
Thank you,
Cheers.
guys.
Bye.
Guys, you take care.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving up your time and taking the time to spend it with us this evening. So thank you, and thank you to all the viewers.